What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. And as we come towards the end of the year, what I want to do is go back and, kind of review the year, I suppose, and look at, where we've been over the last year, what I suppose has changed, and how the promotions have kind of gone. And the first promotion I want to look at today is PFL. Because I think, look, I've covered all the PFL events up until the final, and obviously covered the final as well. And I think it's what's very interesting to me about the PFL is that we know what's coming always in terms of the amount of shows, in terms of who wins. How they win will determine what comes next. And it's a very easy one, I suppose, to go back on, to look over and to review. And that's what I'm going to do today. And I'm going to go through just kind of quickly all 10 of those events from the year. But first of all, I'm going to kind of give an overview of the PFL. And I suppose the first thing I will start with is what I just said there about it being way more easy to review the PFL at the end of the year, and that is down to their structure. That's down to their regular season and down to their playoffs. Now, as someone like me here in Ireland, I don't really have a great understanding for that in terms of the the American structure of the regular season, the playoffs and things like that, and it doesn't go by the year and all. Okay, we have a league system and someone at the end of the year wins and we go on and whatever, but it's it's a little bit different, and something that has been obviously very alien to any mixed martial arts fan until the PFL started. There was things back in the day, but you know what I mean, recently anyway. And I feel like it's, it was something that at the start I didn't really have great time for. I remember saying it maybe even on this podcast or another podcast that I thought it was a bit of a gimmick. And you know what? It definitely is a gimmick, no doubt about it. But I always kind of said, unless you have good fights, unless you have good fighters, it doesn't really matter what structure you have. And for a large part, I would stand by that, but I actually do think the structure adds something to it. I think their structure and one championship in a different sort of way has fighters that may be inferior, or some fighters that may be inferior to even Bellator and the UFC, but the structure, the way they do things actually makes it more enjoyable and makes it more exciting. And that's without a shadow of a doubt the case for the PFL. So as someone who was a skeptic of it coming in maybe a few years ago, I've actually kind of grown to really like it and enjoy it. And I enjoy the meritocracy part of it. Now, I think a big issue for PFL, which if you go back and listen to the show I did last year, one of the things I was saying was the big name fighters weren't getting, to the finals, and they were missing out on it. And that somewhat was the case again this year. But I think what they really did to mitigate it this year was they put extra fights on. So they put undercard fights on the finale and on the playoffs and different things as well to get more fighters on it, to get more names in, which I think was a very, very good thing. Now, we have Rory and others as well. It wasn't always, you weren't always able to do that with Showtime and others as well when they lost out in the regular season. But I generally think they did a better job of that this time around. I suppose in America, the finale was on pay-per-view as well. I haven't heard anything with the numbers or anything like that. It's very difficult for me to say on that because I didn't, it was on YouTube here. We could watch it for free and it was on Channel 4. So it's very difficult for me to speak for someone in America or anything. But hearing people talking about it and talking to people myself asking about it, I don't think that went down well. I don't think people like that. So that maybe is something they'll review for next year, see what way they're going to adjust things and do things differently. But adjusting things and doing things differently for next year is going to be a big thing, and we'll talk about that maybe after I go through these events here, because what we are looking for next year from PFL is going to be very, very different, I think, from what we saw this year. But overall, in general, to run through a few more kind of things just before we get to the cards themselves, I think in general, the outcome of the PFL, if you're to go through it all, I would say was a positive in the year. The fights were generally good. Comparing to last year, I don't think there was that many, judging controversies or anything like that. There was some great stories, obviously, with Pacheco and with Loughnane and more. The production, I think, at the very first PFL number 1, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, there was issues. And I remember talking to someone from PFL, and they were asking me, what's going on? What are you seeing? And I said, look, this and this went wrong. And I'm sure they did that to a couple of more people. And even from that night, the end of that night, I think it improved. And since then, there's really been no issues. So I give them massive credit for that. Lots of promotions won't do that. Won't even, kind of just fly along by the seat of their pants and keep things going and don't improve things. Whereas for PFL, I will definitely give them credit for that they improved as things went. And once they got it good, they kept it like that. So I give them great credit for that. Another thing I give them credit for is their commentary. I spoke about this last week. Someone asked me in the Q&A, and I know they're not for everyone. And look, commentary is like that. Some people don't like certain commentators, others, like I know Big John McCarthy. I really like Big John. I know a lot of people don't like him. A lot of people don't like Mauro, and I'm like him. A lot of people love Daniel Cormier. I'm not his biggest fan. And you could go on and on and on. I generally, like Kenny and Randy were someone who got a lot of stick when they were in the UFC back in the day. And I was probably one of them doing the same. Definitely for Kenny anyway, Randy somewhat. But I think both of them have improved so much. And I think the three-man boot, the way it is now, helps them. And I think Sean O'Connell helps them as well. The way he is the play-by-play guy, but brings a lot of colour to the play-by-play, if you want to put it that way. He is the one kind of bringing the Rogan / Daniel Cormier kind of joy or laughter to it and stuff, which can become overwhelming, whether it is any of the three guys there I just mentioned. But I think it actually helps Randy and Kenny an awful lot, not having to do that. They can stick to the X's and O's and all of that, and I think it really helps them. I think it might have hindered Sean O'Connell a little bit. Now, I used to be a big, massive fan of him. I'm kind of 50-50 on him now, which is, I don't think is probably a good thing to consider where I came from, but I think it is for the good of the broadcast, so I'm not going to complain too much about it or anything like that. Couple of the negatives, I think the biggest negative is this whatever it's called, the judging algorithm BS. They need to get rid of that. Like it's really simple that it's just misinformation. It is just pure and utter misinformation, and it's nothing else. So they need to get rid of it. So if you haven't seen this judging algorithm, they've made up their own judging algorithm. It gets scored out of 100, and they say who won the round via that. That's not how judging works. Judging doesn't work that way. You can't create an algorithm to judge a fight. You just, and look, maybe you can, right? And maybe judging should work that way, but it's not right now. And to have something else like that is just complete misinformation when it pertains to how fights are actually judged, when it pertains to how fights are scored. Some people might say, oh, it's a helpful guide or something like that. Absolutely not. A helpful guide would be someone telling you the criteria and telling you why someone won or lost or that round or why the round is close. So that is terrible. Verdict MMA, I don't see him using it as much anymore, and that's absolutely great. Another thing that is, in my opinion, not helpful in any way. No problem. Fans can give their score, but I would rather one person who knows how to judge a card through the actual criteria over 10,000 people who don't know giving their opinion. I'm sure someone who is like, let's say, Steve Uray, if loads of people are gone in with Verdict MMA from Scotland, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of 10-9s going for Steve Uray one way. And they say this crowds thing is going to work as well. There's logic in crowds. No, absolute nonsense altogether. So I'm glad they've kind of rolled back on that a little bit. Hopefully they keep rolling back and they roll it out the door and we never see it again. So yeah, those are a couple, I suppose, of the plus points and minus points from PFL this year. But overall, as I say, I think it's been good. So let's roll through the cards, and obviously I'll have a few more points to make as we go throughout it here. So the first card opened up and it was Clay Collard and Jeremy Stevens in the main event. You could argue that this was the fight of the fight of the year. It might have been. It was a great fight, an absolute barnstormer fight. Clay Collard won it. And it's funny, Clay Collard came in as one of the stars of the year in PFL. And, just as I opened up this card, I was like, oh yeah, Clay Collard's in the PFL this year, So it's funny how that happens. Some people emerge and some people kind of go by the wayside in PFL, and it's weird how that happens. But he won that fight against Jeremy Stevens, who went on to have a couple of fun fights there as well. Now, it's funny, a lot of the fighters on this first night, especially towards the top, in the top three fights, were were kind of non-entities, I suppose, by the time it came to the end. Haush Maffeo beat Don Madge. Don Madge was expected to have a great season. Didn't happen for him. And no, the problem with this season as well, there was a lot of injuries. There was a lot of people pulling out. Antonio Carlos Jr. as well. He was one of those ones who ended up pulling out as well. Bruno Capelloza. There was lots of, and I'll probably get lost here midway through it if we're being honest. So, bear with me with that, but I think this was a good card to kind of start it off. There was that big finish for Maffeo and for Antonio Carlos Jr. And then we had Aubin-Mercier, I suppose, winning the split decision against Nathan Schultz. A lot of close fights a lot of good fights for Aubin-Mercier, a lot of good wins. This was a close one, and I suppose he is the kind of a one. So he improved throughout the year, and I think it really suited him this year. And for someone like Schultz, I remember talking after this and saying maybe it's not the place for him anymore. Maybe he'd be better moving on. I think there's a few more guys like that as well. Corey Hendricks beat Emiliano Sardi and this as well. And Steve Ure, who got to the final, lost to Alex Martinez. I think Martinez was very good this season. I enjoyed some of his fights. He's a guy I think who will be back as well. Martin Hamlet beat Theodoros. Mari Akhmanov got to the final, knocked out Victor Pesta in quick order, as did Rob Wilkinson. So the two finalists at 205 fought and won on the first night. He beat Bruce Soto, and Simeon Powell as well defeated Clinton Williams in one of the undercarder fights there. So all in all, a good start to it. But I'm just looking here that Anthony Pettis was supposed to be on this as well against Miles Price. That was a move forward. Joshua Silveira was supposed to be on this. He ended up coming back in later on. Corey Hendricks was supposed to fight Clinton Williams. So those fights didn't end up happening, and things kind of got moved around. So there was a lot of that on PFL this year. Let's move to night 2 and have a quick look at that. This one was the heavyweight night, I suppose, with the 145 pounders as well. Bruno Capelloza topped this card and knocked out Stuart Austin. And I suppose Capelloza is maybe the sorry story of this year in the PFL. He was the guy that I thought honestly would emerge as the biggest star from the PFL season. We'll talk in a minute about how he ended up losing. He ended up getting injured. He ended up pulling out, and he didn't even reach the finale this year. So a big disappointment there. I remember at the end of last year, I was calling him one of the best heavyweights in the world, one of the best kind of maybe up and coming guys in the world, even though this was his 20th fight. But it was a big disappointment for him, and he's another guy who will be looking to bounce back next year. Obviously, beat Stuart Austin on this night, but other than this, it was not a great season for him. But we'll get to that, I'm sure, in a second. The 145 pounders, then, like it was this 145 pound division for PFL is it's really good. It's really good. And do you know what? If I was the PFL and I was going forward to next season, I wouldn't change it too much. Chris Wade beat Lance Palmer. Lance is another one who maybe would be better off maybe taking that next step. And I think that's the thing he's kind of spoken about. Chris Wade is a great competitor in the PFL, and I think he's good in the tournament as well. And then we bring Loughnane against Roger Kudo. Like, Kudo very well could have won this. It went to a technical decision 3 minutes into the third round after Kudo had hurt Brendan Loughnane badly in the first. Loughnane just about won the second, and then he won 3 minutes of the third to take the decision. This really could have been the end of Loughnane's his season. He ended up winning the million, and unbelievable comeback, unbelievable story throughout the year for Loughnane. To me, I might have said it for someone else, but the male star, we'll say this year with Pacheco on the other side of it. But Roger Kudo, if you're listening to this and you didn't watch much of the PFL, or maybe you just caught the finale and you didn't watch the regular season, I think Roger Kudo is a very good fighter. I really like him a lot. He had a disappointing semi-final. It was against Bubba Jenkins, wasn't it? Yeah. where he lost in quick order there, but I think he put on a great show throughout the year, and he's the guy I'd love to see back. And if he's not, I think Bellator, I think UFC should sign this guy. He's a very, very good fighter, and I'd love to see him fight lots of different fighters. I'd love to see him fight Loughnane again. I'd love to see him fight Wade, Palmer, any of these guys again if he comes back next year. So if I was onto the PFL and giving him advice, I'd be sent to bring him back. In the elsewhere in the 265 pound division, then there was a few big fights there. Oh, actually, before we get to that, Bubba Jenkins fought as well against Kyle Boshniak here, won the decision, as did Sheehan Moraes over Boston Salmon, and Alejandro Flores over Saba Beloy. The heavyweights, as I said, Hina Ferreira beat Jamal Jones. He looked an absolute menace at the start of this year, knocked him out in 25 seconds. At this point, it was a lot of people were talking about he could be the guy at heavyweight. Denis Goltsov as well coming back here after a bit of an absence. He won in the first round here, and then Ante Delija knocked out Matthias Scheffel, a fight we will see later on in the year again. And Scheffel looked really bad in this fight. Ante Delija looked very, very good. But it was one of those fights that we probably didn't think we would see again ever, maybe in the PFL or this year. But indeed, we did manage to see that. Clidson Abreu as well beat Adam Koresh on night 2. Night 3 saw Kayla Harrison. And I suppose, do you know what? Maybe when we look back at this season for Kayla Harrison, I think we will maybe have more of an idea of how much she actually did underperform. Like, she went to decision against Marina Makachina. She fought well enough. Wasn't madly dominant or anything like that. She won the fight. She won all 3 rounds. She didn't have much trouble. But when you're going to a decision with someone who's 6-3, she's big. She's a good Samba fighter and everything like that. But Kayla Harrison should be blowing these ladies out of the water, and she absolutely didn't here. Now, she did in a way, but you know what I mean. She should be finishing Makachina, and there's just been too many of those for Kayla Harrison. Like, just let me quickly look back through her record here. Like, we'll go from the Makachina fight. So she won that. If you look at the Pacheco fights as well, she's bringing them to a decision. But it feels like the more and more she goes, the longer some of the fights are going. Like the Taylor Gordado fight at the end of last year went into the second round for 9 minutes of a fight. This one went to a decision. Pacheco again this year went to a decision. Now, look, she is still destroying most people, don't get me wrong, but I think there were slight signs there. I wouldn't say there are massive signs there. It's easy to be the general after the battle, but she had not a great fight here, and not a great season all in all for Kayla Harrison. We'll talk more about that in a second. Carlos Leal defeated Ray Cooper III. Ray Cooper, this was one where Cooper missed weight, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it? He didn't have a great season, Ray Cooper. And look, it's happened in the past. I'm sure he'll be back, but it'll be very interesting to see what happens next year with Ray Cooper. With Anthony Pettis against Miles Price then, Miles, obviously an Irish guy coming in, gave me a bit of extra interest in it. Not a great performance from Miles here, but he had better ones. He was off for 3 years before this. But a great night for the PFL, I suppose. Anthony Pettis won here. Rory McDonald won here. And it was, I suppose, all on the up and up form. Rory McDonald destroyed Brett Cooper inside of a round. Then Larissa Pacheco knocked out Zamagul. Danilo Taylor, who had a great season, beat Joe Jefferino. Jenna Fabian beat Julia Budd. I suppose the upset of the early days of it, and a big blow for PFL as well. They wanted to set up that Julia Budd fight with Kayla Harrison, which obviously didn't end up happening. But then Sadibou Sy as well, who emerges, the champ, as a very good fighter this year, beat Al Sakin. Gleison Thibault lost to Al Shalawi, who another guy who fell out of the tournament and all of that. So there was a lot of people. I think Abby Montez is another one here who, after beating Clarissa Shields, looked like to be someone who maybe not necessarily challenge Harrison, but be a bit of a star for him. She lost to Elena Kolesnik via split decision, a very, very close one there, but Martina Jandirova won as well. So obviously the 155 pounders, the women started off. Pacheco and Harrison won there to move forward, and the welterweights moved forward as well. That was, I suppose, the kind of the opening few weekends of it. Then we moved on a couple of months, and the fourth iteration of the PFL saw Clay Collard lose to Alexander Martinez. This was, I suppose, the one that a lot of people had controversy about in terms of the judging. I think it was a close one, but I was impressed by how Alex Martinez fought this season. Clay Collard, a bit unfortunate, obviously, as well, to lose that one. They made Antonio Carlos Jr. as well, winning unanimous decision. Aubin-Mercier won the decision. And another one, I suppose, Jeremy Stevens, Miles Price, that went to a close, controversial split decision. Look, you can call me biased. I thought Miles Price won the fight. Very, very close fight. Would love to see Miles back, but Jeremy went on and got the win there. Bad start for Miles, and he showed great heart to come back in, and he almost finished him towards the end of that fight. So that was interesting. Akhmedov went in again, got another big finish in the second round there. Nathan Schultz got a win over Martin Held, Dylan Mancha, and Rob Wilkinson again got a big finish. Like, it was very, very impressive from the 205-pounders this year as well. Akhmedov looked good. Rob Wilkinson looked great. I was a big fan of Josh Silveira. He came in here, beat Martin Hamlet, who was a good fighter, a dominant wrestler, and a hard guy to beat. And Joshua Silveira finished him in a round. So it was very, very impressive there. We'll move on to the fifth night of fights. And this was the upset, maybe, well, the second biggest upset, I would say. Matthias Scheffel in the top fight of the night beat Bruno Capiloza in the night of upsets. Stevie Ray beat Anthony Pettis. He got the modified twister on him, where Scheffel won the decision over Capiloza, who didn't have a great night that night. There was a no contest in the Hina Ferreira Clifton Abreu fight. Chris Wade beat Bosniak. Ante Delija won again. He had a very dominant season. Bubba Jenkins won his fight against Exxon. Lance Palmer beat Sherman Rice. Goltsov ended up winning his fight. And Kudo beat Flores. This was a really, really great knockout, a right hook. And to me, again, another guy, Kudo, who a lot of people maybe don't have as much knowledge of as they should. He ended up winning that. There was a few fights changed here as well. Brendan Loughnane ended up fighting Ago Husick. He was supposed to fight Boston Salmon. Bubba Jenkins was supposed to fight on the night against Balaji. That was obviously changed. Goltsov was supposed to fight Sam Kay. And Dideja was supposed to fight Stuart Austin. And even before that as well, I think it was on the third night that Magomed Karimov, yes, was supposed to fight against Joe Zeffirino, and that didn't happen. I think it was in Russia, and the ability to get into the country and things kind of changed that one around. So it was knocked off that fight. So it was tough at the start of the year, especially. Times changed very quickly. It was a tough start of the year for a lot of the fighters and for the PFL themselves. We run on into the sixth card at the start of July. And this was Kayla Harrison coming in and I suppose turning up the heat, beating Kaylin Young, who had put on a good performance against, I think it was Julia Budd, wasn't it? She fought before that, and she's a good fighter, but Kayla Harrison ended up winning there. Sadibou Sy took a very close decision over Rory McDonald. Not a classic, but I thought he won it. And he won that well. Ray Cooper beat his namesake Brett, destroyed him very, very quickly. Magomed Karimov ended up getting back into the country, beat Danilo Taylor. Larissa Pacheco put on a fabulous display of ground and pound to knock out Jenna Fabian in the first round. Al Salawi got massively knocked out by Magomed Malatov. Montez lost again, did time to Makahina, another split decision. So a very unlucky year for her there, losing a couple of close fights. Jenderova and Kaleshnik also won on number 6, number 7. This was where I suppose the playoffs got going. And the one thing I would say about this, so we went from the 1st of June, July, until the just over a month later, which was good, which was a good kind of jump. But then it was the 28th of the 8th was the end of the playoffs, and the finale was the 25th of the 11th. So we went 3 months and 5 days between PFL number 9 and PFL number 10. Now, I know people need time to recover, and I know fighters can't fight every week and all of that, but to me there was too much of a gap there. There was too much of a gap there. I wonder, can they do it where instead of a month between the regular season and the playoffs, maybe you put 6 weeks between the regular season and the playoffs, and then less time between the end of the playoffs and the finale. I think that might be a little bit better. It just feels like, this almost feels like last season, you know? It almost feels like that there's too much of a gap. And I know there has to be a gap. These people are fighters and they can only fight a certain amount of times in the year. But I would rather do it maybe instead of doing it in 4 gaps as they're kind of doing it in now, where they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then 7, 8, 9, and then 10 at the end. They could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then leave a gap, and then the 3 shows after that, and then the finale. I think that might be the way to do it. Now, not saying fight 6 weeks in a row, fight 3 weeks in a row, a little less of a gap, 3 weeks in a row, bigger gap, then another 3 weeks, then a smaller gap, and then the finale. Just so you're not breaking up the season so many times that we kind of forget what's happening until we have to read the card and go, oh yeah, this happened, this happened, this happened. And that's kind of why I'm doing this as well, because I'm sure a lot of people kind of have forgotten that. Anyway, we'll look at this here. And this card, obviously, they brought to Madison Square Garden. It was kind of an upside-down card. There was fights all over the place. But the main attraction here was Stevie Ray, who again beat Anthony Pettis. You know, he beat him by unanimous decision this time. Pettis and other people were calling it a fluky one after that, but it by no means was a fluke. Stevie Ray, a very, very good fighter, very underrated fighter, beat Anthony Pettis here. Big shock. Look, Pettis did enough. He got to this part of the tournament, but ended up losing. And we talk about meritocracy. Stevie Ray earned it. He beat him twice and he earned his way through, so fair play to him. Again, in the 155-pound division, another guy who earned it. Aubin-Mercier beating Alex Perez. Great job there. Akhmedov, then Rob Wilkinson both won at 205 pounds. Rob Wilkinson beating Dylan Monte, knocking him out in the first round, and then Akhmedov beating Joshua Silveira, who is obviously, you know, a very, very tough matchup and will be there, I think, again next year, and will look good there. So those were the big ones there. We had Martin Hamlin as well against Corey Hendricks, and a lot of undercard fights as well. On the 8th event of the year, they went to Cardiff and they went to the Motorpoint Arena for that one. Obviously, you know, they had a lot of the more local fighters. You know, Will Fleury from Ireland was on the card. Lee Chadwick was on the card. They had a few Italians and other people as well on it. At 170 pounds, Danilo Taylor beat Rory McDonald. I remember, I don't know, was that a wedding or something this weekend? I remember hearing from someone, Rory McDonald is after getting knocked out by Neil Taylor. I was like, oh, Christ almighty. So that was a big one. Look, for Pettis, for Rory, you know, the proof is in the pudding, and fair play to the other people. Hungary came in and beat him. Ante Delija beat Renan Ferreira. As I said about Ferreira, at the start of the year, a lot of people were calling him the guy. You know, he was the monster coming in. He's the guy who's going to be facing Capoloza, maybe can beat him this time around. But Ante Delija just showed he's well-rounded. It's a very, very good fighter. And maybe one of the most underrated heavyweights in the world, I would say. I think he'd go into the UFC. I think he'd do well, if I'm being totally honest. And a great win there. Matt Sheffield in, I think, turned it around massively. He got in, beat Juan Adams. Look, we know it was supposed to happen. It was supposed to be Sheffield and Gostilov. It was supposed to be Capoloza and Gostilov. None of them ended up happening. You know, it ended up being Sheffield against Juan Adams, and he won the fight. He got the knockout in the 3rd round. Sadibou Sy ended up getting the win as well there. You know, we saw Nathan Kelly coming in, getting a fight in PFL, and others as well. So it was interesting them coming to Cardiff, and we'll talk more about that in a second at the end of this, and what I suppose we're going to be looking at next year. Then we have the end of the playoffs, and Kayla Harrison here won again. This one was in London in the Copper Box Arena. They had a few more, you know, they had Miles Price back in this against Maxine Hell, and a few more UK fighters and things like that on the card. Kayla Harrison won, got the arm triangle over, got gender over. Brendan Loughnane got a big win in front of his home crowd. Not hometown crowd, but home country crowd, allegedly. I think he's mostly Irish, though. He beat Chris Wade in a phenomenal performance. You know, at the time we were saying it was the best performance of his career, but that ended because there was another one after it. Pacheco got the win. Jenkins got the win to set up the finales. Then, you know, they had Dakota Decheva getting on it. It was a bit of an upset. Stuart Austin beat Sofian Bakaju as well on that card. And then we got to the finale. So the finale, I suppose we're not too far out from it now, but it was a crazy night. It was a great night. You know, we talked about the pay-per-view and all like that, but if you're just look at the card itself and the stories that came from the card, I think it very much delivered. If we go, you know, from the bottom to the top, the only thing that fell out from it as well was Shane Burgos and Marlon Moraes, and you know, which is good because the finalists stayed together, and we wanted them to do that, and that was great. You know, they had, what I like as well about this, they had a few of the fighters who you'd want to see, I suppose, in the undercard. You had Magomed Karamov taking on Thibault, you had Decheva, you had Schultz against Stevens, you had Marlon Moraes debuting. Okay, it didn't go great, but if a lot of people wanted to see that, you had a few of those attractions. If they could have got Pettis, if they could have got Rory on it, that would have been good as well, but you know, those lads lost, and maybe they're thinking about coming back next year or whatever they're doing. I don't have as much of a problem with it this year as maybe I had with it last year. I think they did it a bit better this year by getting a few lads on it. Rob Wilkinson, what a performance he gave this year. He ended up getting the doctor stoppage, destroying Omari Akhmedov, did so well in that fight. Sadibou Sy beat Danilo Taylor to take the 170-pound title. No one would have predicted that at the start of the year, that he would have won it, or that would have been the final. Aubin-Mercier against Stevie Ray. Like, Aubin-Mercier, a great performance for me here. I thought, like, he probably won the first round, but he won it in such a way that I thought he might have trouble, and then he adjusted and got the knockout in the second after, struggling to remember it completely now, but Stevie Ray had to fight to the ground, didn't he, almost, or was going for the submission and didn't end up getting it, but like, the three of those guys, Wilkinson, Sy, and Aubin-Mercier, three really kind of unheralded guys, but three guys who went in there and won $1 million. And that must be said, and everyone else as well. The fact that PFL are handing out $1 million checks here, God bless them, like, fair play to them. I'm not ever going to say anything bad about PFL in that terms. If they keep doing that, they're making these people's lives. You know, they really, really are. And we complain about that enough in MMA. I'm definitely not going to complain about this. Fair play to them. I don't know how long it's going to last. I hope it lasts forever and these people can keep getting paid. But someone like Wilkinson is a very good fighter. He deserves it. Someone like Aubin-Mercier, who is toiling his way through a very hard division in the UFC, coming out here and putting on clinics against a lot of these lads, absolutely deserve it. And what about Sadibou Sy coming through this year? Great stuff from him. We'd asked Bernard and Julia Bud. I thought Bud won that fight. It was a close, again, a split decision. And in the top three fights, Delija, Loughnane and Pacheco. Look, Delija is probably the easiest one to break down here. He won against a guy who did his best, came through, showed a lot of heart throughout the year, showed a lot of moxie to come back from that. Like, it was an embarrassing loss in the first round, but Ante Delija is just a top heavyweight, and a really great performance from him here in a worthy win. And in the top two, well, what about these for stories? You couldn't have written the top two stories better than this. Like Brendan Loughnane coming from the Dana White Contender Series, where Dana White did this thing, and told him, look, go away. If you're good enough, go away and prove you're good enough. Like, kind of, snotty nose laughing at him, you're not going to be good enough. And for Brendan Loughnane to go out and win $1 million and earn more than his champions earn over in the UFC, God almighty, was just beautiful to see. It would nearly bring a tear to your eye watching. It was absolutely brilliant just to stick it to him like that. Because, like, someone like me, I've been watching Brendan Loughnane for years. I watched Brendan Loughnane fighting a Bama card here in Ireland, and before that as well. And for someone to look at 10 seconds of his fight and write him off as no good, that was awful. Like, Brendan Loughnane is a very good fighter and constantly improving. And this was the best display of his career. Absolutely brilliant all around, first, second to last. An absolutely brilliant display. Ended up finishing Bubba Jenkins, who himself is a very good fighter as well. And a great story, an absolute great story. And then Larissa Pacheco, look, what more can we say about that? Beat Kayla Harrison, won the decision. Relatively close fight if we were to take fighter A versus fighter B. But Kayla Harrison, she showed a lot of issues. She showed that there are a lot of things to work on, but Larissa Pacheco showed that she was able to come from losing twice. She learned from that fight. She's put on size, she's put on strength, she's become a real legitimate 155 pounder, and she was able to showcase her skills against Kayla Harrison and did extremely well. So absolutely fair play to her. Shock of the year, could be female fighter of the year, won a lot of awards in the last fight of the PFL year, and you must say for PFL, what a result that is. Your finale of your finale was the best moment of your year. You couldn't write that. You couldn't script that. That's exactly what they wanted, and they're lucky. But fair play to Larissa Pacheco for claiming that and earning that. And for Kayla Harrison, it's back to the drawing board, and we'll see where she goes from here. She's talking about not fighting in the tournament next year, talking about these pay-per-view cards and all of that. And I suppose that can kind of swiftly move us on to what's happening next year. Just briefly here, I suppose, before we go. I was just looking here on the upcoming events. And they're talking about, the contender series, is that what it's called? Let me just look here again quickly. Challenger series, sorry. It's 16 events each week from, let me see when it's starting. No, it's actually, sorry, it's less than that. It's 7 events, is it? I don't know. They have a load of events anyway. No, they've already had 8 of them, so they're gone to the next ones. Yeah, so it's starting at 9 on the 27th of January, and then running weekly for the next 7 or 8 weeks after that. And look, they had that last year. Didn't watch a load of it, to be honest, because it's kind of the up-and-comers there. But also they have, I suppose, the European Challenger Series, the European Top Series. I'm very interested to see how that's going to work. Because they signed a few lads here that I know in Ireland. They signed Will Fleury. Like, Will Fleury should be in the top competition. He shouldn't be in a competition below to earn a spot in the top competition. He's fought at a high level in Bellator. He's been, a champion across was it Brave, or where did he win the championship? Somewhere like that anyway. He's a guy who could have got signed by the UFC, could have gone back into Bellator. He should be at the top table now, in my opinion. And maybe he will be, I'm not too sure. But there's a lot of those unanswered questions, I suppose, with PFL coming into next year. Who's going to be in a Challenger Series? Who's going to be in the tournament? Who's going to be on this, non-tournament cards that they're running? What does it take to move from here to here to here to here? I think we're going to have a lot of explanations for that and see how it works. Now, I'm skeptical, but I was also skeptical, as I said at the start of the show, a few years ago when they started up all of this, and now I like it. So I'm prepared to wait. I'm prepared to see how it goes. I'm prepared to see if it's good. And if it is good, I'll enjoy it. If it's not good, I'll come on here and I'll give out about it. But there's a lot changing in PFL over the next while. They're on DAZN as well here in Ireland and the UK and other places. More money. It's going to be tough to actually consume all of them and pay extra money. You're talking like a tenner a month. That's an extra 120 quid to plough into MMA. For MMA fans that were already ploughing into hotels and into UFC Fight Pass and into, if you're here, BT Sport, or if you're in America, into pay-per-views or into ESPN or whatever it might be. It's very expensive to be an MMA, UFC, PFL, Bellator, One Championship fan these days. It's very, very expensive. So that's an interesting move to see how that works out. But, all in all, I think it's exciting times for the PFL. I'm interested to see who they sign. Can they get Cyber? Can they get Nathan Diaz? Will Rory McDonald still be there? Will Anthony Pettis still be there? Will some of the big fighters from this side of the world be signed with him and be fighting at the top table? I'm very, very interested to see all of that. Will they take the place as the second best organisation in the world? Will it be Bellator? Will it be One Championship? Interesting times. Very, very interesting times ahead. And I'll be here talking about it all. So I'm looking forward to getting back going and talking about the PFL fights in the Smart Cage once again. All right, everyone, I will leave it there. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all of you. I'm Sheehan from Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.